What's going on, people? We are Tottenham TV, and it is time to react to those comments again. You guys have been brilliant once again reacting to all our content that we've put out over the last week. We've picked out the best comments to react to, and we're going to get into that in just a second. But just letting you know, guys, please do hit that subscribe button. Only 60% of you are subscribed watching this video, so that means a whopping 40% of you need to hit that subscribe button. I'm not sure what you're doing if you haven't done it already, but 40%, big number.
So statistically, 40% of the people going to read out haven't subscribed.
That's exactly
so come on, everyone who's left a comment, you got to subscribe. Come on, people.
And we're also on platforms such as X, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook as well. So go show us some love over there. But let's get into these comments.
All right, first one is no use for a name. Says, I find it strange that the hair one, in brackets, don't watch enough to know which one is Ben or Sim. The one that defends Ange seems to have always defended Ange to death, but when talking about options that may come in, says he isn't a fan of them, while also saying they would have us higher in the league and they might have the same sort of problems as Ange, but probably not as far down. So he's basically admitting that managers he doesn't think much of would still do a better job than a guy who has defended forever. It's weird, man. When did I say I don't think much of them? I think that I actually put on record. Huh?
You did say that.
No, I didn't.
You did.
I said I think they're all good managers, I said.
No, in the video you said they don't move you.
They don't move me, but I think they are all good managers. My point being is I actually don't think they're much better than what we have right now is my only point. I do think they're all good managers. And I think next season, let's say all three of them would take over in the summer, I think all three of them would have us in a higher position than we are now. I don't disagree with that. I also think Ange would have us in a higher position than we are now next season, is my point. I think they are all good managers. I've got no problem with them. I even said if Iraola took over, I think he could do a good job here. I think all three of them could probably do it. Who was it? Iraola, Silva, Frank. But I also don't know if either of them last. Let's say Ange is getting sacked at the end of the season. I don't know if any of those three managers last beyond the 2 years that Ange has had.
What manager would move you then? Like, what's a manager that would move you?
Nagelsmann, someone like really high level.
Nagelsmann. Anyone else?
Klopp. He would move me.
Anyone realistic though? Both of those are not realistic.
Who would be the right man to head? Who would head this project? Who would really get me excited? I'm not saying those managers. I wouldn't be like backing them if they came in. I think they're all good managers. Is my point. Like I'm not. My point being, like, I think they can do good jobs here. All of them, to be honest. I think they all could do good jobs here. But here's my point. My point being is we're going to have to give them time. That's my point. We're going to have to. If they're going to throw them away at the first sign of trouble, or if they start to falter and we're going to throw them away, then these aren't the guys to come. They're not going to be perfect appointments. Is my only point. I like all three of them. I think they could replace Ange. Maybe more likely, maybe Iraola, or I don't know. Yeah, I think Silva's good as well. They're all good. I just don't think they're massive upgrades on what we have.
I think they are upgrades on what we have, and I feel like when you say dismissing a manager after the first sign of trouble, it's not exactly that's not exactly what we're doing with Angelo, is it?
No.
Like, it's been many signs of trouble over a sustained amount of time. That's been the reality with Ange Postecoglou. And when you look at Iraola's tenure at Bournemouth, it started off horribly, didn't it? Mm-hmm. And it took him a while to get to grips with things. But since he's had that, he's had quite a consistent run of it, albeit he is in a bad form of late in terms of the last 5 or 6 games. But I just feel like with a better set of players, with a bit more money behind him, he could do a lot more.
Potentially. I don't know if he could do better than what Ange did in terms of 5th place last season. I'm not certain of it, is my only point. I like him. Don't get me wrong. I think he could do a good job. Give him time. He could do a good job.
Yeah. It just depends on how much time is enough time for us to see the kind of fruits of their labour. Like, how long will it take these managers to like imprint their ideas on the team?
Yeah, it's hard to know until you get them in.
Yeah. Because I feel like right here, right now, we should be seeing like the kind of what we're about kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Where I know injuries kind of hampered that this season, but we're not really seeing like any sort of like system flourishing at the moment.
No, and I would argue that what's happened to us this season, in terms of the amount of time we had, the amount of injuries, any team it'll derail them. But you could also make the argument that when we didn't have the injuries, we'll be good enough anyway. I would argue, especially beginning of the season, there were points where we were showing signs of being a better team, but that has been massively derailed, unfortunately, and that's why we are where we are. But obviously he's got to take responsibility for losing way too many games, even within that injury crisis. We lost so many games where we shouldn't have lost, and we lost them. And, there has to be some accountability for that as well. But my point being, look, as I said, those three managers are good managers. I don't have any massive problem with them. I just don't look at those managers as massive upgrades on Ange, just me personally.
All right, well, we're about to wait and find out and see, because if one of these managers does come in, we'll see, over the course of a year and a half to see how it does. But let's move on to the next one anyway.
Tipe Duke says, why Iraola, Silva or Frank? What have they won? Sure, they manage good football, but they all manage mid-table teams, and Spurs are no better. Levy should bring in a proven manager and stick with that person. I know, a pipe dream. If one of the above three are brought in, Spurs fans will be calling for his head in 2 seasons. Mid-table manager beget mid-table teams. They are exceptions, but I don't think Iraola, Frank or Silva are that.
I mean, I think Frank has only had one real job in England, and so has Iraola. I mean, Silva, I feel like, has done fairly good jobs. I mean, there was one job where he didn't do. I think the Everton job. I can't remember if he did. He just jumped ship, or he jumped ship to go to Everton.
No, well, he jumped ship to go to Everton, but he left them in not a great position. But he had an okay first season. I think he finished like 8th. It was like decent. I think they were looking like they were building something. Then the second season, it went horribly wrong.
Yeah, I mean,
he got sacked similar time to Poch, I think.
I feel like, though, with Marco Silva, in every club he's been at Hull, he's been at Everton, and now he's been at Fulham. Has he been at somewhere else apart from that in the Premier League?
In the Premier League, no. Obviously, he was at Sporting, was he? And he did quite well.
I'm saying for those 3 clubs, I know, like, on paper, it's not going to show that he did an amazing job. This Fulham job, in terms of on paper, is probably the best one he's done. But I've always looked
Interesting,
back.
you're saying there's context.
I've looked back at as Marco Silva's tenures at all 3 clubs, and I've liked what I've seen, to be honest.
I think he's got them playing decent football. I remember Hull, he didn't keep them up, but they played a bit better when he came in. I think I remember them beating Liverpool in one of the games he played, but unfortunately I think the damage was done. He couldn't keep them up, but I don't think he was really ever close to keeping them up. Everton was very hit and miss, I would say. But again, Everton have been a club there's been a lot of trouble with anyway. But he was okay for a bit, and then it all kind of fell flat. And I think he jumped ship to go to Everton. I'm kind of feeling there was another club in between, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, maybe.
And then, Watford.
Watford, yeah.
Yes, he was at Watford. And that one, he did jump ship. I remember he got appointed start of the season. I remember what happened. So what happened was he got appointed start of the season. They were playing really well for like 2 months. And then Everton approached him. And then something happened, like they approached him, and I think Watford rejected it. But he really wanted to move. Like he was pushing for it, and they rejected it. And then then I think he ended up getting sacked in January because form fell off a cliff, because I think the speculation. And then that following summer, he got appointed Everton manager.
Yeah.
So that's what happened there with Watford.
And I feel like so he's had quite a few jobs in the Premier League, right? I think he knows what the Premier League's about, and I think like he's done fairly well. Iraola, he's like kind of been on a slow upward trajectory in his career where he's done well in Spain. He's come over to England. He's doing well. And I feel like both Silva and Iraola are both like kind of on upward trajectories waiting for bigger roles, in my opinion. And I feel both of them could do really well at Spurs. Frank, I'm not totally convinced about, albeit he's done an unbelievable job at Brentford. But like, I feel like, I think you've said it in the past as well, like, he's just a very good fit for that club. I think it remains to be seen whether he can go to like a big structure club and do well there.
So I think him and Everton could be a really good fit.
Potentially, yeah.
Frank and Everton, but I don't know about whether it's when he's asked to get a team competing for like top 4 and stuff. I don't know.
But you also never know with these kind of managers, is like the way they play, is that the way they really want to play? Or is that just because of the club that they're at, they play that way?
But I get that, but it's a risk. say hiring a manager to play in a different way to how they're playing. Because if they've got success playing the way they have, that's why you want them.
That's why we signed Nuno, right? We signed Nuno. We like going back to his like previous job, saying, "Look, he did play attacking football in that club." You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's a risk.
Yeah.
I think it's a risk. I think you would want a manager who's proven he can play the way you'd want to and be successful with it. I don't think you'd sign Frank and say, "Okay, now completely go not play how you played at Brentford, which what got you here, basically."
But regardless of that, he's saying go get a proven manager and stick with that person. I mean, we had Mourinho who's proven, we had Conte who's proven, and we didn't stick with them.
What about Gasperini? He would be good. I like Gasperini.
Could be interesting. But I feel like signing Iraola or signing Marco Silva is more of a similar appointment to Pochettino. Like that kind of style of appointment. Kind of like done it in the Premier League and ready for that big job.
Yeah, look, as I say, I think both of them could do a good job at Spurs. I agree with that. I think they're both good managers. But whether they could elevate us, I don't know.
I think they could.
I'm not sure. The Ice Phoenix says, I like how Sim can pick apart Iraola's tactical flaws, but is totally blind to Ange's many tactical flaws. I'm not blind to them. I just think anyone who's losing, you can pick out the tactical flaws when they're losing 100%. And when a team's winning, you think, they're a tactical genius, then it's flipped. I think that's how it works. Ange obviously has tactical flaws, but so does Iraola, 100%. My point being is, I don't know if Iraola's tactics are that much better than what Ange has to offer, to be honest, but they're doing very well at the moment, and they're doing well this season for sure. But I think as well, Ange's tactics can work, is my only point. But I'm not blind to, I don't think Iraola's tactics are bad. They're not bad tactics, but they're flawed. I know Ange's tactics are flawed as well, but I don't know if Iraola's are much more flawed than Iraola's. Is my point.
Yeah, I'm unsure on that. I mean, I see Bournemouth play and I see Iraola play, but when you look at every single manager in the world has some sort of flaws to his tactical. You look at all of the top managers in the Premier League, right? You're looking at Arteta, you can see flaws in his tactical setup. You're looking at Pep Guardiola. You're talking about a team where you can get at because their defensive structure is not so strong and they play a high line. And if you play a certain brand of counter-attacking football, you can score goals against them. So I don't think any system is devoid of some sort of flaws.
Exactly.
But I feel like Ange Postecoglou and his tactical setup maybe has a few more flaws than maybe the medium.
I just don't agree with that. But look, each their own. That was my only point. I'm not blind to Ange's flaws. I know he has them. I know, like each system does. But that was my only point about comparing it to Iraola is I don't know if it's any less flawed, is my own point. Hotspur Hero says you shouldn't keep players that don't want to be here, and especially when they say shit in the media. Why do our fans rate this guy so highly? Cash in on this joker. Any guesses who he's talking about?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious. It's Cuti Romero,
yes,
right? And I mean, look, if a player doesn't want to be here, you have to cash in. There's no other way. There's no point keeping a player at the club against his will. We've seen it many a time with many different cases across many different clubs. If you keep a player against his will, ultimately, whether he wants to or not, the tools are going to be downed. And
Modric, he stayed and he was pretty good.
One more year he stayed, yeah. 1 more year. But I feel like that was an exception to the rule. Mostly players are just going to be probably moping around. Look at Eriksen, for example. He wanted to leave for the next year or two after that. He was poor. Nowhere near the Eriksen that we saw before that. And there are so many different cases of it. And I think Berbatov might have been a case of that as well, just moping around the place a little bit. So if Cuti Romero wants to leave, this is the summer to do it, because this is the summer we're going to get top whack. Because if he wants to leave, he ain't going to sign a new contract. That contracts keep going down and down and down. 2 years to go in the summer. This is the summer to do it.
We kept Kane, didn't we, when he wanted to go to City? He did mope around for a bit, but then got back to his best.
Yeah, Kane is just the ultimate professional, isn't it?
Yeah, I hear you. But I agree. If he wants to leave, we should sell him. But I don't think we should take a reduced bid just because of it. I think we still got to get a good fee. But
it's a fine line, though, isn't it? Because then, if you don't take that kind of, let's say you don't get a bid of 70 million this summer, and then you go through a year of Cuti Romero who's not really the best kind of Cuti Romero, and then you're not getting the value out of him. And then next summer you've got a year left, and then you don't get, like, you know what I mean? Like, how far do you take it?
I guess depends what the situation is. If it's like we've won the Europa League but he still wants to leave, I would still say, okay, if that's the case, then I would probably drive a harder bargain, because if we're in that Champions League, he's still got that you know, you can still kind of pitch that to him that, look, we're in the Champions League, we can compete for big things, whatever. But if we're out of Europe completely and we finished wherever we are in the league, then it's like, okay, we have to kind of take what we can get. We have to kind of let him go, kind of thing. TB9662 says both Saka and Salah play on the right. Does that make Sonny the best left winger in the league?
I guess it does. I guess it does. Who's a better left winger in the league than Sonny?
Well, who are the best ones? You got
Not on current
got,
form,
like,
just in general.
You got like Gordon, you got Diaz, Gakpo, Martinelli, Trossard. Who's it for Chelsea? Sancho. For Man United, Garnacho. City, you got Doku and Grealish. I mean, I'm not really. None of these names really. I'm saying I'm convinced are much better than
good
Son.
players. Don't get me wrong, but if Sonny was in any of those squads, he would see a considerable amount of game time from the left-hand side, if not starting the majority of those games.
He probably starts ahead of all those players for a lot of those players, and also goal contributions this season. How many of those players I named have more than him? Probably very few.
None.
Who plays on the left for Villa? You got Rashford, who's obviously playing well on form. I mean,
none of them have more goal contributions than Sonny.
And that's Sonny not having a good season, apparently. So, for me, I mean, Hudson-Odoi, Bowen plays on the right. So, if we're just talking left wingers, you got a case.
Sonny's the best left winger in the league. Signed, sealed, delivered.
Mitoma. That's it, really, maybe. Semenyo plays there sometimes.
Sonny. It's all about Sonny.
Eze.
Sonny.
Yeah, can't think of too many. Can't think of any.
Well, there you go.
So there you go. Maybe that's what we're saying. Call us deluded. CCM2852. Ange has been a complete shocker. People will claim Conte and Mourinho were disrespectful and disruptive to the club, but I never remember any of them having constant spats with the fans, creating the club into a meme we'll never escape from. It's who we are, mate. He gives us the most arrogant press conferences, even though he's literally our worst manager ever. Hate to say it, but he's our first manager that I felt vindicated when he loses. Would have sacked him after the Forest game. Most shocking thing is he beat out Marco Silva for the job. Absolute joke that is.
I hate that kind of thing where, because I'm a guy who, like, you know, I'm not the biggest fan of Ange Postecoglou, but I would never go into a game apart from that Man City game last year being like, I want us to lose so this guy could be sacked. I want us to lose so this could happen. I don't want us to win the Europa League because it means Ange is going to be here. That's all rubbish, man. You're a fan of Tottenham Hotspur first and foremost, and you should want us to do well on the pitch. And whether you don't like the manager or not, if he does do these things and does do well and does win games and wins the Europa League, then that means he's on an upward trajectory and he's doing well. So you should want us to win games.
Also, saying that Ange is the one who's created us into a meme. First of all, we're a history of memes. Tottenham becoming the first team that Mourinho didn't win a trophy with. That's going to stick with us forever.
Not Mourinho's fault.
Doesn't matter. It's still going to stick with us. And Mourinho didn't win that trophy. Same with Conte as well. That's also going to stick with us. In terms of Ange, I guess he's saying that Ange has been more disrespectful to Tottenham than Conte or Mourinho. What do you think of that? Or more disrespectful and disruptive to the club? I guess it depends what you mean by that.
I just think sometimes Ange can act a bit childish, to be honest, when, you know, snapping back at fans and stuff. Sometimes he just needs to learn just to calm down a little bit and just like brush these things off like most other professionals do.
No, I completely agree with that. He shouldn't be reacting to having spats with fans and stuff like that. I think you're a Premier League manager. You've got to know how to manage your emotions a lot better when fans are shouting at you and stuff like that. Yeah, I don't really remember Conte or Mourinho ever reacting like that to fans. But did they not have? Do you feel like Mourinho and Conte did have an air of like, you're lucky to have me kind of thing about them?
Well, the reality we probably were, to be honest. These guys are pure winners that have come in this club, and they're like, they think it's absolutely madness that we've brought them into the club, and the club haven't kind of like followed suit and done everything that we need to do to get them successful in the club, where kind of like every other club they've been at have done that, apart from maybe Man United and Mourinho. But I think it's more to do with Conte than Mourinho, because I do think Mourinho was on probably a bit of a downward trajectory by the time we got him. But Conte was still, in my opinion, at the height of his managerial career, like, you know, not declining or anything, Antonio Conte. So to have these kind of managers in and to treat them the way we did is nothing short of disgraceful. And look, you can say like, oh, it always turns toxic with Mourinho, it always turns toxic with Conte. Yeah, maybe it does, but I can take it turning toxic if it means a few trophies along the way, right? But we don't get that trophies along the way because of the way the club is run.
No, I completely, I agree with that as well. Hugo Wu Yu 69 says Paratici has definitely had his fair share of flop signings. The problem with Lange is that although he hasn't had many flops, he hasn't brought in anyone that moves the needle for this team. They're basically all mid-solid, cheap deals. Paratici gives us more upside to land top talent like Decky, Porro, and Romero. So for Lange, so far, Lange's marquee signing has been Dom Solanke, who's been a massive flop in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think he's been a massive flop. He hasn't kind of, excelled. I mean, he's done very well in terms of it's very hard for us to play without him. He's integral to the way we play. However, you would have expected a lot more goals from him, and that's the biggest gripe, I think, with Dom Solanke. But I don't think he's been a flop. There's been aspects to maybe his time at Spurs that maybe have been kind of towards that narrative, but I actually think he's been a fairly good signing for Spurs, Solanke. But for him to be that kind of marquee signing of the Lang tenure so far, yeah, we need more than that. That's the reality.
Yeah. Obviously, Bergvall is looking like a top signing at the moment. We know Gray's got a lot of potential. Odebear, we haven't seen because of injuries, and we have to see his potential. But these are all guys who are very young, and they're going to take time. We haven't really had anyone who kind of immediately improves us, except for Dom Solanke. He's the only one, really. I wouldn't say he's been a massive flop. I wouldn't say he's been an absolute game changer, but he hasn't been a massive flop. I just think he needs to be scoring more goals. He needs to be better finishing. He just does. He has what, 11 all competitions, 7 in the Premier League. It's not a bad total altogether at this point, but it's not a great total either. I think, and considering he scored 19 Prem goals last season, you'd expect him to be definitely at least 10 by now in the Premier League, and the fact he's not on that, well, obviously he did miss a couple months for injury, so you got to take that into account, but you would have hoped he would have been on a bit more than that. And just, I think a lot of the times he's been in front of goal, he's missed a lot of chances. But yeah, I guess you've got Werner and Dragoshin. Apart from those two, there hasn't been any major flops really yet, but I guess also time will tell. We don't really know yet, and a lot of these players who we signed. We get more upside with Paratici than. But the thing is, with Paratici, you had the likes of Bentancur signing. He would be willing to sign like a player who's like 25 for a cheap deal, who's ready to slot in. But we're kind of not going for those kind of signings at the moment.
Exactly. So I think like it all goes to Paratici's kind of contacts in the game, I guess, because he knew the quality of these players where no one else in kind of world football was looking at them, because they were like on the periphery at Juventus, where he was one that brought them into Juventus. So he knows kind of the qualities that these players do have, I guess. But I think when you're looking at the top tier signings between the two sporting directors, I mean, it's no question really.
Yves Bissouma 8210. His opinion is, I feel like Bissouma hate is massively unjustified.
Is this Yves Bissouma?
He's not been as good as we expected, sure, but that doesn't automatically make him a flop. I really don't think he's been as bad as people make out. That comes from Yves Bissouma, who has his AVI as Tony Cruz.
Come on, man. He has been as bad as people make out, in my opinion. He just has. Like, he's had good games here and there, but he's just not lived up to any sort of reputation that he had before joining Spurs. We all expected so much from him, and he's been nothing short of a disaster, in my opinion, as a Spurs signing. And yeah, you can point back to moments in time where he impressed us, but for the most part, he's been really disappointing, and he's been so disappointing that the manager's lost trust in him.
I would say, I think he hasn't been as people act like he's been just bad throughout his whole Spurs career. I don't think that's true. Obviously, when you take into account the first season, he barely played under Conte. For one reason or another, Conte didn't want to trust him, and then after he had that beginning of the second season, he then had a fall off up until probably the last couple months of the season. But then Spurs had a fall off, and then this season he started it well, and then kind of the last month or so has been awful. So it's been very inconsistent, but I do think there's been spells of good performances. How I'd assess his Spurs career is we expected him to be one of the best defensive mids in the league, and he's been just okay as opposed to that. So I wouldn't say, in my opinion, I don't think he's just been bad, but he hasn't been good enough, essentially. And that's kind of how I assess Bissouma's Tottenham career. I think if we sell him, I don't think he's going to go on a free. I don't think we're going to struggle to get bids. I do think people will be interested in him. We are probably going to have to take a loss even on the 25 million we spent on him. But I think you could still probably get 20 million.
But the only way is downwards for Bissouma, and if you haven't been good enough, you've been bad.
Yeah, he's not been good enough, but he's just been okay.
I think he's been worse than okay. And if you haven't been good enough, that means you've been a bad signing.
I agree, he's been a bad signing.
Yeah. All right, what's the next one?
Maya, page 2707, says, to be fair, Paratici brought Bentancur in for Conte. He was a star player for Conte. Now it's looking like he's a solid signing, but if Conte was still here, it would be different.
Yeah, I mean, the thing surrounding that is the injury that he got, though, the ACL, the stop-start nature. I do think Bentancur is actually a good player. Maybe what I say about him is kind of bit over the top at times. I do think he's a good player, but I just don't know whether he's going to get back to the Bentancur that we saw pre-ACL. That's what I'm worried about.
For me, I just think he is improving, I think, from last season anyway. But even in this season, when he's needed that consistent game time, which has been so stop-start, so it's hard to judge him. But if you are judging him what we've seen, you can't say it's been all good for sure. There's been a lot of bad performances in there. So I understand a lot of people are frustrated with him. And currently he's been, especially in the last few weeks, he's been very inconsistent, and especially in big moments. But that doesn't mean he can't get there. And I do see signs of improvement from him. So I am willing to give it a bit more time, personally.
It's the big moments, isn't it, that gets you? Because in big games, you expect your experienced players to step up, and he is one of the most experienced players that we got. And when you see the performances like you see against Villa, against Liverpool, and plenty others in there to talk about, it just, lets you down.
I hear that. James Meccano 6197 says, guys, please do your research. It is well known that it takes 18 to 24 months of football post returning from ACL to get back into proper touch. So let's judge Rodrigo next season, and his return to football has been blighted by a bad tackle, injuries, concussions, layoffs, bans. Not a smooth run to get back into touch.
Yeah, that's all true. That is all true, to be fair. And look, if we were to accept the bid for Bentancur this summer, I won't be deeply upset, but look, I'm happy to give him one more year and see where it takes us, and see if he can get back to his best. But it's got to be one more year to prove himself.
I agree. I think it should be one more year. He has to be judged at some point. And then Ashley Hale 9069 says, Sim gives such intelligent, well-considered opinion, and context is important. Nothing is black and white. Ben seems like a great bloke, but does a solid amount of whinging. Sim is patient guy with his quote-unquote mate on his case all the time. My mate, my brother, my big bro. He's always been on my case for 32 years.
And it won't stop.
It won't stop.
Never stop.
Exactly. He's learned one or two things from Ange. We never stop.
I think Ange learnt that from me, man. I've been doing it longer than Ange.
Whinging.
Yeah,
Fair amount of whinging.
Yeah.
There's a lot to whinge about, to be fair.
There is a lot to whinge about, exactly. And Sim is patient. I mean, I don't know where he gets his patience from. Like years and years of getting knocked down from this club. Still has patience.
That's what being a fan is. Always, it makes the good times so much sweeter when you go through so much bad.
And it makes it even sweeter when you win through the bad times.
Apparently. All right, that's it.
All right, that is all the comments we've got for you today. It's very, very soon. We've got football coming back Thursday night, Chelsea away, and all the build-up in anticipation for that game coming over the next few days. But thank you, everyone, for joining me today, or joining us today. We'll see you all very soon. Like, subscribe, and comment. And as always, come on, you Spurs.